Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are taking a massive, mind-bending journey into one of the absolute most profound texts in all of Buddhist metaphysics, the Mahaparinirvana Sutra. Seriously, if you love dissecting the very fabric of reality and asking the really big questions, you are in exactly the right place. We're going to unpack some heavy, deeply fascinating concepts today to make the ultimate nature of reality crystal clear.
So, let's just jump right in and frame this whole ancient narrative with a pretty huge question. Think about this. If you were offered the ultimate truth of the universe, like the literal secret to eternal permanence and bliss, what would you sacrifice to hear it? Now, this isn't just some fun philosophical thought experiment. It's actually the literal setup for a legendary story from the Buddha's past lives that we'll get into a bit later. But to really grasp why this ultimate truth is worth making an unimaginable sacrifice for, we first have to talk about the core problem with the reality we live in every single day.
Section 1. What is impermanence?
Right, before we can even begin to talk about ultimate truth, we have to start with the foundational rule of our everyday, moment-to-moment existence, and that rule is impermanence. You see, the sutra talks extensively about what it calls conditioned phenomena. In everyday, conversational language, this just means that if something is made up of parts, or if it relies on external factors to exist, it's fundamentally unstable. It's kind of like a giant house of cards. Because it was brought together by specific conditions, the moment those conditions shift or change, the thing itself is completely bound to break down. It's an absolute universal law.
And honestly, there's no better way to illustrate impermanence than looking at our own physical world. As the text explicitly points out, our bodies are not static, unchanging things. From the very moment of conception in the womb, the embryo stage, through infancy, youth, and all the way to old age, our physical form is just this continuous, shifting process. Your body is constantly breaking down and rebuilding itself, which means the physical you is entirely conditioned and totally temporary.
Now here is where it gets really fascinating. The text applies this exact same breakdown to our minds. We usually like to think of our consciousness as this solid, consistent self, but the sutra basically proves that our thoughts and emotions are just as conditioned and fleeting as our physical bodies. Think about it. Your mind relies entirely on external sensory objects to perceive anything at all. It constantly swings back and forth like a pendulum between greed, anger, and ignorance. It's fractured into all these different sensory inputs, and it's constantly forgetting the past while worrying about the future. So the mind, just like the body, is entirely impermanent.
Section 2. True permanence, bliss, self, purity.
Okay, here is where the philosophy takes a massive, really exciting turn. If absolutely everything, our bodies, our minds, the world around us, is impermanent and constantly breaking down, what is the ultimate truth? Well, it's Buddha nature. This is the unconditioned reality. To put this in plain language, unlike the fragile, conditioned world we just looked at, Buddha nature isn't made of anything. It doesn't rely on causes. It doesn't rely on conditions. The text beautifully compares it to empty space. You can't break space, you can't burn it, and it literally never changes. Because it is unborn and unceasing, it's the one thing that can never, ever be destroyed.
This right here is the core philosophical revelation of the text, the true definition of reality. Look at the stark contrast. Our conditioned, everyday world is defined by constant arising and ceasing, which inherently leads to suffering, a total lack of a true core, and impurity. But Buddha nature? It possesses 4 distinct, incredible virtues: true permanence, ultimate bliss, true self, and absolute purity. What does this mean for us? Well, true permanence means it never degrades or falls apart. Ultimate bliss means a profound, deep happiness that doesn't depend on fleeting outside conditions. True self refers to an indestructible essence, which is completely unlike our fragile, changing egos. And absolute purity means it is entirely free from the pollution of the everyday world. That is the true relationship between the fleeting world and the eternal Buddha nature.
Section 3. The blind men and milk.
Now, actually grasping this profound concept of a true self and true permanence is incredibly difficult for us ordinary people, mainly because we live 100% of our lives in the conditioned world. To explain this barrier, the text uses a really fantastic, vivid analogy. Imagine a group of people who have been completely blind from birth, asking someone what the color of milk looks like. The sighted person says, "Oh, it's white, like a shell." The blind person taps a shell, hears the sound, and asks, "Wait, is the color of milk like this sound?" No. So the sighted person tries again. "It's like rice flour." The blind person feels the soft texture and asks if milk's color is soft. No. "It's like snow," they are told. They feel the cold and just assume the color white is freezing. Finally, they are told it's like a white crane, and they assume the color of milk is a bird. No matter what conditions sensory comparisons are used, they completely miss the mark and misunderstand the reality.
And the real gut punch here is that our everyday minds are exactly like those blind men. We are so incredibly used to our conditioned, temporary world that we simply aren't equipped to perceive the unconditioned reality of Buddha nature. We constantly project our faulty, limited understanding onto the universe, leaving us in this state of spiritual blindness. We completely miss the true permanence, bliss, self, and purity that actually exists right beneath the surface of everything.
Section 4. Sacrifice for half a verse.
So, to cure this spiritual blindness and finally hear the truth of Buddha nature, the text shares a legendary, absolutely breathtaking story. Long before becoming the Buddha, he was a pure ascetic meditating in absolute isolation high up in the freezing snowy peaks of the Himalayas. The powerful god Indra decides he wants to test this ascetic's resolve. So Indra disguises himself as this massive, terrifying, flesh-eating monster known as a Rakshasa. Suddenly, cutting through the silent snow, this monstrous Rakshasa speaks exactly half of a profoundly deep verse.
This is the half verse the monster speaks. All conditioned phenomena are impermanent. They are subject to arising and ceasing. The ascetic hears this and is just immediately overwhelmed with an indescribable joy. He recognizes instantly that this right here is the path to ultimate liberation, the literal key to the unconditioned truth. But there's a problem. He desperately needs the rest of the teaching. He begs the Rakshasa to finish the verse, but the monster flat out refuses, claiming he is entirely too exhausted and starving to speak even one more word.
Then, the Rakshasa states his terrifying terms. He demands the ultimate price, the ascetic's warm flesh and blood as a meal. Only then will he speak the final half of the verse. Now, remembering what we just learned about impermanence, the ascetic realizes something crucial. His physical body is conditioned, it's fragile, and it's essentially worthless in the grand scheme of eternity. So, without any hesitation at all, he eagerly agrees to trade his fleeting, impermanent flesh for the eternal diamond of truth.
Satisfied with the deal, the Rakshasa finally reveals the second half of the verse. When arising and passing away cease, the tranquility of extinction is bliss. This is it. This is the core message of the sutra in plain language. It means that true, permanent bliss isn't found in acquiring more things in our conditioned world. True bliss is only found when that endless, exhausting treadmill of things arising and breaking down is finally stopped, completely extinguished, leaving behind only the tranquil, unconditioned reality of Buddha nature.
So the ascetic hears the final truth, but he doesn't just immediately jump to his death. First, to ensure this incredible knowledge actually survives for the sake of all other beings, he frantically carves the entire verse into the surrounding rocks and trees. Once he knows the truth is preserved, he climbs to the very top of a high tree and, staying completely true to his word, fearlessly throws himself down into the waiting jaws of the monster. But, and here is the twist. As he falls, the horrifying monster instantly transforms back into the radiant god Indra, who gently catches the falling ascetic. Indra and the entire heavens praise his unimaginable sacrifice. And because the ascetic valued the eternal truth over his own, temporary, conditioned body, the text reveals that this single, selfless act allowed him to skip a massive 12 eons of cultivation on his long path to ultimately becoming a Buddha.
As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a profound question to chew on. We've seen today that our physical bodies, our racing minds, and the sensory world around us are all just conditioned phenomena on a one-way trip to breaking down. But this ancient text promises that the unconditioned reality, true permanence, ultimate bliss, true self, and absolute purity is actually already the fundamental truth beneath all of it. So if that indestructible reality exists right now, what temporary fleeting illusions are you still valuing over your own enduring nature? It's something absolutely incredible to think about. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and keep questioning the nature of your reality.